Like a grand and miraculous spaceship, our planet has sailed through the universe of time.
Like a grand and miraculous spaceship.
Grand and miraculous.
Grand and miraculous.
I think with the Muppets, there's sort of an innocence to them, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that appeals to the child in everybody. Because I think everybody is a child in everybody, still.
Well, we all want to build a time machine, Doc. So when you enter Disneyland, you're entering a time machine.
I only hope that we never lose sight of one thing, that it was all started by a mouse.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our Tower of Terror night. I've seen a few excited people on chat, so I'm super excited to welcome you here. Welcome to episode 21. It's hard to believe we're there. And don't you love that intro? I just got to say, I got some nice comments about the intro. Put some likes and thumbs ups in the chat if you like that intro. I keep watching it, and every time I watch it, I get kind of teary about all the work that all these people have put into all of the attractions over the years to bring us all this happiness. So I'll probably refresh it at some point, but for now, I like it. I think it's pretty cool. So I hope everybody's doing great. Tonight is our Tower of Terror night, and I know there are a few people in chat super excited about it. Let's pop over to chat, speaking of, and I will welcome folks. Beaker and Honeydew, very frequently the first ones in chat. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. Tony O'Tower. We finally did it. We're finally talking about the Tower of Terror. I hope you enjoyed tonight. Feel free to leave me any feedback you have. I'd love to hear it. Mr. Mark Langenkamp, Mr. David T. Thank you for being here. Debbie Bernfeld is in the house. Hey, Debbie. Jason Thibodeau. Hey, Jason. Lamont Gray is in the house. Hey, Lamont. Thanks for all the support. Let's see. Miss K Bell. Hello. Hope you're doing great. Let's see. Udalali Lane. Hey, Kate. How are you doing? Kate was very, very helpful in assembling a bunch of images for tonight. So I want to say thank you to her publicly. Ross and Found is in the house. Hey, Ross. Hope you're doing great. Scroll. Brittany is in the house. Karen Cook is in the house. Thank you for being here. Theme Park Casual, TPC, Danny, hope you're doing great. Thanks for being here. I appreciate all your support. Brittany W, thank you. Appreciate you being here. And I saw some new folks pop in. Miss Monorail Molly. Hello, John. Hope you're doing fantastic. And who else? Scroll. Lots of activity in the chat. So if I didn't get to you, my apologies. I'll get to you at some point. Just keep making noise in chat and, I'll call you out. So in case this is your first time here, I want to talk a little bit about what the show is all about. It's not about Tron, even though I'm wearing a Tron shirt tonight. We're actually covering Tower of Terror. I just didn't have a Tower of Terror shirt. I need to correct that. The mission statement for this series is to unveil the magic behind theme park attractions, exploring their creators, their immersive worlds, and the moments that keep us coming back, with your voice shaping the journey. So what we like to do is to highlight one attraction every week and just to go deep into it and figure out how it works, tease it apart a little bit, and look at its structural and narrative bones a little bit and see how it works. As always, I like to start with some trivia. So for those of you familiar with the Tower of Terror, tonight's trivia is, as you may recall, when you enter the building in the queue, you'll see a directory up on the wall. And the directory is a standard, like a hotel directory or an office building directory, but there are some letters missing. And if you look closely, those letters have dropped down and there's a secret message printed at the bottom. What is that message? Do you happen to know what it is? If you do, you can mention it in the chat. And I'd also like to encourage you to share your memories of this attraction, especially, I'm sure Tonya Towers has a few ideas. I'd like to encourage you to share your memories, your nostalgia, and so forth. As always, what we like to do is to encourage you to come to our website. Our website is grandmiraculous.com. There's no and, just grandmiraculous.com. There's also a QR code up there if you prefer that. And the entry code for tonight is very simple. It's DROP, D-R-O-P. So you can use that to register your vote, and we'll see how it goes. So let me pop back into chat in case anybody's popped in. I think I covered everybody. Very cool. I think I've got it set up. So let us go to our standard format, and we'll start covering tonight's episode. We are covering the Tower of Terror tonight. That is a iconic attraction that has many people fallen in love with the parks again. What's interesting about this attraction is that it's not a what we call quote unquote classic attraction, like It's a Small World or Pirates or Haunted and so forth. This attraction is relatively new, yet it's gained so many followers and so much love. So it'll be interesting to tease it apart tonight to see how it ticks. Just as a recap, evaluating theme park attractions is very subjective. So what we try to do is to tease it apart using 3 different axes: immersion, storytelling, and delight. I know I mentioned last time or the time before, I'm thinking about re-engineering some of these axes, but for now we're going to keep it the way it is. I represent these through radar plots. So basically, if you go to grandmiraculous.com, you can see these different ratings for each attraction. And if you see more blue in the triangle, that means it's a better rating. And of course, this is not a monologue. I really need your help. I need your support. So please contribute in chat. Go to the website, contribute your voice, and we can see what we can come up with together. So far, the community's ratings have been pretty right on. And I'm very happy to say that the Haunted Mansion rating is sky high. It's not a 10, but it's sky high. So I'm very grateful for everybody who went there last week. Just as a reminder, we're a proud member of the Disney Streamer Network. So the DSN website, which is dsn.disneystreams.com, you can go there at any moment and you can enjoy a variety of different Disney streams. Thank you to our friend Lawrence for setting this up, and please go support them. And as always, I like to encourage you, this is a labor of love. So if there's any way that you can support a charity that supports the memories of these attractions that we know and love, one that I love is Lake Buena Vista Historical Society. They're a 501c3 charity, and they put on a great show called Retro Magic, which we've talked about before. So I won't bore you with that, but please go and support them or another organization of your choice if you like what you're hearing here. Okay, let's get into it. Tonight we're going to be covering the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, or just the Tower of Terror, depending on which version you're talking about, or Guardians of the Galaxy, Mission Breakout, etc., etc., etc. So, facts and figures. There are multiple versions of this attraction around the world, as you probably know. The first one opened at Hollywood Studios as Disney MGM Studios, and it opened in 1994. In California Adventure, a version of the Tower of Terror opened in 2004. It closed a number of years later in 2017, and it reopened with a brand new skin. In fact, the word skin is underselling it. It's a completely new attraction featuring the Guardians of the Galaxy. And as you can see in the lower right, you can see that there's a lot of changes that have occurred to the building to support that quote unquote reskin. Tokyo Disney Sea has their own version, and it's a remarkable version. If you've never seen the Tokyo Disney Sea version of Tower of Terror online or in real life, go check it out, because it actually is a completely unique experience. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then we have the fourth version, which is in the Walt Disney Studios Park in Paris. And that opened in 2007. As always, we like to talk about Imagineers that have had a hand in crafting these attractions that we know and love. Tonight, we've got to recognize Mr. Marty. Marty Sklar is someone that we've featured many times on this show. Marty was the head of WED, and basically he was driving the ship during the execution of this attraction. So we've got to give him credit where credit is due. The next few names are new to the show, because remember, this is a relatively modern attraction. So Mr. Kevin Rafferty, we haven't talked about Kevin before. Kevin started in 1974 as a dishwasher, of all things, and he joined Imagineering in 1978 during Epcot's recruitment. He became a writer in the late 80s, and he contributed to many attractions over the decades. He helped pitch the concept for the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. So he was the one who actually connected the Twilight Zone IP with the Tower of Terror concept. So if there's anyone who was able to bring those two things to life, it's Kevin Rafferty. He retired after finishing up work on Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, and that capped a 40-year career in themed entertainment. He also authored a book called Magic Journey in 2019. Next person is McNair Wilson. McNair Wilson actually received a personal blessing from Walt Disney at the age of 15, who encouraged him to become an Imagineer later in life. He later discovered Walt's autograph in a 1966 Rose Parade program his father had given him. So there's a lot of history there. He collected signatures from 20 original Imagineers on a 1958 Disneyland map he bought as a child. And he was a member of the quote-unquote Dinosaurs Club, a legendary lunch group of Imagineers and animators. He continued consulting for Disney after leaving Imagineering, and he worked a lot with Michael Eisner. Mr. Greg Combs. Mr. Greg Combs was a show set designer, and he started as that after studying theater, and it led to a 30-year career at Disney. He helped build Disneyland Paris, joining during its early development, and he designed major attractions like Indiana Jones, Tower of Terror, which is why we're mentioning him, and Roger Rabbit. He led Tokyo Disney projects, including Beauty and the Beast. Folks, if you haven't seen the Beauty and the Beast attraction in Tokyo, it's amazing. We'll probably have to feature it some night. And the upcoming Fantasy Springs. And he shifted to leadership roles, as people often do. Okay, so let's get into it. We're going to start talking about the attraction tonight. So where do we begin? So let's rewind. Before we rewind, we need to talk a little bit about why we're covering this attraction in the first place. So we're stepping into the eerie corridors of one of Disney's most iconic attractions tonight, the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. And it was unveiled first in 1994 in Walt Disney World. It was more than just a thrill. It was a masterclass in immersive storytelling, which is key to what we do here. It drew inspiration from Rod Serling's classic television series. Imagineers created an experience that basically combined Hollywood's golden age glamour with supernatural suspense. And it's risen in multiple Disney parks around the world. Each version has its own slightly unique twist. And it's more than just a drop ride that you see in many theme parks. It cemented itself as a cultural landmark in many ways of the term in theme park history. But we've got to rewind a little bit, and we have to rewind back to the 1990s. Disney was in the midst of what CEO Michael Eisner called the Disney Decade. We've mentioned this before. The Disney Decade was an ambitious plan to expand the parks with groundbreaking attractions. Now, at the time, Disney MGM was still kind of the new kid on the block. It opened in 1989, but competition was really heating up. Universal Studios had just opened in 1990, and it brought a new wave of kind of cinematic thrills to Orlando. So Disney needed to answer that. They needed a bold, defining attraction for its Hollywood theme park, something that would blend storytelling, technology, and pure adrenaline. The stage was set, so Imagineers had to dream up something truly, truly unforgettable. There were actually a lot of early ideas for what this big e-ticket attraction could be. For example, in the late 1980s, there was an idea for a free fall ride in Disneyland Paris called Geyser Mountain. Yes, it was another mountain. It was scrapped, but they picked up the idea of a free fall ride, and they tried to create different ideas for haunted attractions. For example, a Stephen King themed attraction, a Vincent Price ghost tour, a Mel Brooks narrated ride, even an awards show featuring Elvira, where she would honor classic monsters. So imagine that we almost had an attraction in the Disney park that Elvira hosted. What a concept. Well, eventually the Twilight Zone came together, and just like peanut butter and chocolate, it was a perfect fit. So when Imagineers were searching for the right narrative framework, they turned to one of television's most enduring classics. And that makes sense because this was, a theme park modeled after movies and TV. By licensing the property from CBS, Disney was able to ensure that the attraction would carry the unmistakable voice and tone of Rod Serling's anthology series. Now, Serling himself appears in the pre-show. Now, he obviously wasn't around to film it, but what they did was that they took archival footage from actual episodes and a carefully crafted voiceover from a voice actor. The ride has an eerie hotel lobby. If you've been through it, you know what I'm talking about. There are a lot of artifacts all over the place. And even the sense of stepping into another dimension all drew inspiration from episodes of the show. In fact, if you walk around the area, you can see little artifacts from different episodes of the Twilight Zone. So it's more than just a thrill ride. The Tower of Terror became kind of a living episode in and of itself of the Twilight Zone. And guests weren't just watching the story, they became a part of it, which makes a great attraction. So where did this idea come from? Once the decision was made to give Disney MGM kind of this e-ticket defining attraction, they had a big challenge. How do you create a ride that feels both cinematic and terrifying, but still very distinctly Disney? That's a hard thing to do. There were early brainstorming sessions where they explored haunted hotels, supernatural tales, and even broader Hollywood-inspired adventures. Well, there was a breakthrough, and the breakthrough came when the team realized that they could merge a richly themed hotel setting with a ride system, unlike anything that's ever been seen before. Now, this required close collaboration between Imagineer storytellers and outside engineering experts to design an elevator. It didn't just move up and down, it could also travel horizontally. So that was a key thing, and it immersed guests deeper into the story. The result was almost a perfect fusion of narrative, architecture, and technology, and it really set the stage for one of Disney's most ambitious attractions. I'm going to show some artwork along the way because I love looking at early prints and early ideas of what these attractions eventually came from. There are these great pictures here. While I do that, let me pop over to chat. I see a few new friends. Mr. Pete McDevitt. Hey, Pete. Hope you're doing great. Thanks for popping in. Timothy. Hey, Timothy. Hope you're doing great. Thanks for being here. Let's see. Anybody else? If I don't miss you, again, please mention your name in chat and I'll say hi. And let me remind you to hit the like, share this out, and please subscribe if you're new. There's another elevation view of what the tower would look like. Well, there are a lot of inspirations for the architecture of the tower. It wasn't intended to be just a ride. It was intended to be a landmark. Now, Imagineers drew heavily from the architectural language of 1930s Hollywood when Art Deco was at its peak. The building's vertical lines, the geometric ornamentation, and the crazy lavish interior details they all echoed the elegance of that particular era. Now, at the same time, the design incorporated Spanish colonial revival elements as well. And that style defined a lot of Los Angeles architecture. For those of you familiar with the studios, as you walk up, quote unquote, Main Street or Hollywood Boulevard, you see some buildings to the left and right of you. Well, those buildings were basically defined on Los Angeles architecture for various famous buildings. In fact, one of them on the right side is based on a building on 6th Street, which my father had an office at, and I spent lots of time there as a kid. So it's fun to walk past that building and actually look up and say, yeah, that's where I used to do my homework. Of course, it wasn't literally there, but it was based on that building. So anyway, they continued that trend to bring famous pieces of LA architecture and culture, especially to the Tower of Terror. Now, to complete the illusion, they gave the hotel a very weathered, kind of abandoned look, as if it had been frozen in time, because that's part of the story of the attraction, since a fateful night when the elevators disappeared and the guests disappeared. So this attraction rises high above the park. In fact, it's 199 feet high. At the time, it was the highest attraction on park property. And if any of you know why it didn't exceed 200 feet, why don't you drop it in chat? There's a good reason for that. So the silhouette was very much a part of the attraction as just as much of the ride is. In fact, a funny story is, as you look, if you're in Epcot and as you look at the Morocco Pavilion, it actually lines up almost exactly with the back of the Tower of Terror building. And what they did was that they built kind of the top of the tower so that it would mesh in perfectly with the skyline of Morocco. So I love pointing that out to people whenever they're in Epcot. You say, hey, look at that. You know, the Tower of Terror just lines up just perfectly. So it's a fun thing to do. And yes, I see people mentioning in chat the right answer. If you're above 200 feet, you've got to put red lights and all kinds of safety things up top, which kind of ruins the mood. So they try to keep it under 200 feet as much as possible. Well, the story of the attraction, every great attraction needs a story. Tower of Terror is no exception. They created the Hollywood Tower Hotel. Now, there's a real Hollywood Tower Hotel. However, this Hollywood Tower was fictional. This was a once glamorous retreat for the stars of 1930s Hollywood. On Halloween night in 1939, a violent storm struck. Lightning hit the hotel, and in an instant, 5 guests riding the elevator vanished without a trace. The hotel was shuttered, left to decay, and its grandeur was frozen in time. Now, today, when you step into the tower, you're not just a visitor, you're checking in to discover the mystery of that fateful night. The story sets the stage for the supernatural journey that follows. So what it does is that it blends Hollywood elegance with chilling suspense. So it really hit that kind of sweet spot of peanut butter and chocolate, so to speak. The attraction opened in 1994, and it opened the doors to its public, not as a glamorous retreat, but as Disney's newest and most daring attraction. I mentioned it was 199 feet. It was the tallest structure in Disney World at the time. The opening was celebrated with Hollywood-style flair. It drew press and fans eager to experience it. And from day one, it was hailed as a triumph of immersive storytelling and engineering, instantly becoming a very signature thrill ride, not just of Disney MGM Studios, but of the whole Walt Disney World area. Guests weren't just lining up to have a drop, they were stepping into a legend at the time that they didn't know it. So we've got to talk about the structure and some of the engineering that was accomplished here. The Tower of Terror, it wasn't just about atmosphere. This attraction was a technological breakthrough, and it did things that no other ride had ever done before. So unlike a standard elevator, Imagineers, they designed a completely new ride system. So the elevator car itself is almost an autonomous vehicle. You can think of it as a vehicle going through a dark ride. Well, that meant that it could move horizontally through the haunted hotel's show scenes before locking into the drop shaft where it goes up and down. Of course, once it's in place, the system delivered the world's first programmable freefall experience. So no 2 rides were exactly the same. Each 2 drops could have programmable differences. Maybe you might, go up here and then go down. Maybe next time you go down and then go up. So what was great about this is that it really helped the replayability of this attraction, because you never quite knew what kind of experience you would get once you would get to that drop point. Now, behind the scenes, engineers, of course, built in multiple layers of safety, and the tower became one of the most advanced and most reliable attractions at the time. This was a perfect marriage of storytelling and cutting-edge technology. Now, this is a fantastic image of what the tower looks like. as you see, you board down here. I don't know if you see my cursor or not. You board down here and you start going up the tower. There are actually 4 individual towers. You could call them towers or shafts, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta, that you essentially start out the ride on. And as you go up, I'll show video of what this looks like in case you haven't been on it. You start to see some scenes and you move from scene to scene. But once you get to the top, you enter this section, and the big surprise for those who haven't been on it is that the elevator starts moving forward. And by moving forward, this is a complete shock because most of us think an elevator just goes up and down. So as you start moving forward, you start seeing scenes from the Twilight Zone. So you're really you're getting a double effect, both the surprise of the movement and also the visuals of the Twilight Zone really kind of hit you. And then you start entering that dark period. And in that dark period, your ride goes into the main drop shaft. And that's where the mechanisms lock onto your elevator and then move you up and down. As I'll call out later, the mechanism actually moves you faster than gravity. So it doesn't just drop you and then be done with it. It'll grab you and move you up and down faster than gravity does. So as an interesting side note, whenever I see our friends who stream from Hollywood studios and they go on this ride, very frequently when they reach the drop shaft, sometimes you'll see the image actually invert for a brief second and it comes back. The reason for that is that the drop shaft is actually pulling them down faster than gravity. So because of that, your poor camera thinks, oh, gravity is now up here. So it actually flips the image for you. Of course, eventually the real gravity kicks in and then it reflips the image. So in case you ever see people flipping the image on Tower of Terror, that's not intentional. That's a feature of how the ride actually works. I thought that was an interesting call out. So let's talk a little bit more about this show. So what truly set this attraction apart was how it wove the Twilight Zone theme into every layer of the experience. So rather than simply borrowing the name, Imagineers actually designed the attraction as if it were a lost episode of the series. Now, Rod Serling himself appears in the pre-show thanks to his carefully restored archival footage. Excuse me. And they had a voice performance that seamlessly matched his cadence. So once you're in this pre-show area in the library, you're introduced to the chilling backstory. And there's all kinds of flickering televisions and Rod Serling's iconic narration happening. Of course, once you're aboard the elevator, the ride unfolds like a really surreal journey through the 5th dimension. And you all know what it's like. I'll show you video in case you haven't been on it. So long story short, in the end, you're not just watching an episode of the Twilight Zone, you're living through it, which is the point, which is the exact point of what we try to show on this series, is how these attractions can be immersive. Now, the cue in the pre-show experience is almost a masterclass because it tells a story long before you ever step into the elevator. Guests first wind their way through the hotel's overgrown gardens outside, and there are cracked fountains and broken statues, and it hints at decades of neglect. Once you're inside the lobby, though, time appears to have stopped entirely. Remember, the story is, on that fateful night in 1939, time froze, and the hotel essentially is in that state from there on out. So you see dust-covered luggage, you see faded furniture, and you see all kinds of cobwebs around the place. In fact, the interior of the lobby is so grand. I've often seen people their jaws just drop and they just look around and they don't realize that the line has continued on. Now the journey continues into the library where you see a television that springs to life and you see Rod Serling's chilling narration. In case you haven't seen it, I want to play it and we can all appreciate the work that they did. Sorry, one moment.
You unlock this door with the key of imagination. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of sound. A dimension of sight. A dimension of mind. You're moving into a land of both shadow and substance, of things and ideas. You just crossed over into the Twilight Zone. Hollywood, 1939. Amid the glitz and the glitter of a bustling young movie town at the height of its golden age, the Hollywood Tower Hotel was a star in its own right, a beacon for the show business elite. Now, something is about to happen that will change all that. Time is now, on an evening very much like the one we have just witnessed. Tonight's story of the Twilight Zone is somewhat unique and calls for a different kind of introduction. This, as you may recognize, is a maintenance service elevator, still in operation, waiting for you. We invite you, if you dare, to step aboard, because in tonight's episode, you are the star, and this elevator travels directly to the Twilight Zone.
Your rooms are nearly ready. Proceed.
It's such a fantastic pre-show, and it really sets the mood for what you're in for. Let's go back here. Now, once you're on the ride itself, the defining moment is, of course, the drop. You know, that's what it's all about. Everything leads up to the drop. Now, Imagineers, just like I mentioned, they didn't settle for a simple free fall. They created a ride system where it actually pulls you downward. So it's more intense than a simple free fall would be. And like I mentioned, the sequence is randomized. So no two rides are ever the same. Just when you think you know when it's going to go down or up, you know, you'll get surprised with a different plunge. Now, adding to the drama, those of you who have been on it know this. Once you're at the top, the elevator doors open mid-ride, and it gives you a big view of the park, probably one of the nicest views of the park that you can have. Of course, you don't have a moment to enjoy it because you know you're going to go back down again. And, you know, you get yanked back down into darkness. And there's a wonderful little choreography of anticipation and shock and surprise, and it really is a remarkable experience if you haven't been on it. Let me just, before I get into it, I want to show you the rest of the attraction because there's some cool stuff in it as we go forward.
You were the passengers in the most uncommon elevator about to ascend into our very own episode, the Twilight Zone.
So this is the first scene. As you go up, you see the doors open and you see a scene. There's some beautiful stuff in this vista, you could call it. There's forced perspective, there's pepper ghost effects, and it's just marvelous. I especially love this part because you see a star field effect, but it's not just in front of you. There are actually star fields in the car with you. So it's almost a 180 degree, if not more, view of the stars.
One stormy night long ago, 5 people stepped through the door of an elevator. That door is opening once again, and this time
Now, this is a part when you're at the top and the doors open, and you, at first glance, you just see this kind of interior kind of construction, and you might not know what's coming, and then it starts moving forward.
opening for you. You are about to discover what lies beyond the fifth dimension. beyond the deepest, darkest corner of imagination, in the Tower of Terror.
It's so much fun to hear everybody screaming and hollering. And if you haven't been on it, it's a really intense experience, and you can see why. At this point, the car pulls back and it basically parks itself so that you can exit it. And of course, go through the gift shop. So what did guest reactions look like originally? When it opened, it was an instant sensation. Guests were blown away by the way that it combined a very immersive story with a truly terrifying ride. The media praised it as one of Disney's boldest attractions, and they basically noted how it pushed the boundaries of what a theme park experience could be. Now, for many, it was love at first drop, but for others, the intensity was almost too much, and I've seen some commentary in the chat about that very point. So that commentary in and of itself kind of added to the ride's reputation as a must-do. People were chattering about how it scared them so much that other people said, "Oh, I've got to do this thing." So it cemented itself as kind of the crown jewel of the theme park, the attraction that defined this park's identity for many reasons. And it drew, of course, thrill seekers from around the world. Now, it wasn't just for Florida. A decade after the original Tower of Terror opened, Disney brought the experience to the West Coast. So on May 5th, 2004, the Hollywood Tower Hotel rose above Disney's California Adventure. Now, it shared the same chilling backstory, but there was one critical difference in the ride system, and the ride system was streamlined. Now, gone was the horizontal vehicle movement, and it was a more direct path to the drop shaft. So once you were essentially seated, you pulled backwards, and then you were inside the drop shaft itself. So there was no kind of going to the top and wandering through the Twilight Zone. This just put you straight into up and down. Now, the exterior design also reflected LA's Pueblo Deco style, and it tied the attraction more closely to California's architectural heritage. Now, for DCA, which DCA at the time was still struggling, it was trying to find its identity. So the Tower of Terror became a much-needed anchor for the park, and it drew guests in, and it gave the park a signature thrill ride of its own, which was sorely needed. This was also brought to Paris. In 2007, the Tower of Terror crossed the Atlantic, and it made its debut at Walt Disney Studios Park in Paris. Now, this version was closely modeled on the California design, so it had the same streamlined ride system without the horizontal vehicle movement of the Florida version. Its exterior was tailored to blend in with the park's Hollywood Boulevard area, and it felt like a natural centerpiece to the park. Now, of course, it retained the Twilight Zone storyline because, it's for one thing, it's a great storyline, but also it had Rod Serling's narration and the eerie Hollywood Tower backstory. For this park, it's often been criticized. Remember, we're not talking about Disneyland Paris here. We're talking about the studios. And this park has been criticized quite a bit for lacking depth and major attractions. So this was a big, much needed anchor for the park as well. And it elevated the park's reputation. It gave European guests their own chilling taste of the fifth dimension. And then we have Disney Sea. Disney Sea is an interesting case. When the Tower of Terror came to Tokyo Disney Sea in 2006, now they faced a unique challenge here because the Twilight Zone was not widely known in Japan, so they couldn't transplant that IP. So rather than rely on the American TV series, they created an entirely new storyline here. When you enter the building, you enter the opulent hotel of a character named Harrison Hightower III. This was a wealthy and arrogant explorer who filled his tower with stolen artifacts. Well, his downfall came after he acquired a mysterious idol known as Shiriki Utundu. Legend says that the idol cursed him, and during a fateful elevator ride, Hightower vanished without a trace. So the hotel was abandoned. It was left haunted by his greed and the idol's dark power. Now, this version of the tower is also a masterclass in cultural adaptation. It retained the thrills of the original, but it told a brand new story that really resonated deeply with Japanese audiences. Again, if you haven't watched this version of Tower of Terror in Disney Sea, please go take a look. We have a link in our playlist of attraction ride-throughs, and you could see there are actually some dubbed and some subtitled versions where you can see what they're telling you, because of course it's in Japanese. But the story of Shiriki Utundu is a lot of fun, and there's actually a magical effect that happens during the pre-show when this idol kind of appears in front of your eyes and then boom, just disappears like that. It's a great effect, and it's a very interesting version of the tower. So looking at the different versions across the parks, now each Tower of Terror shares the same DNA, of course. The ride systems vary significantly. Florida's original version is of course, the most ambitious version. It has a groundbreaking horizontal track, and it allows elevators to move through show scenes before entering the drop shaft. Now, when it was brought to California in 2004, they simplified the system. So they removed the horizontal movement and they focused on the drop experience itself. Paris followed suit, and Tokyo Disney Sea's tower, despite an entirely original storyline, the ride system itself is very similar to California and Paris, and it prioritized efficiency and reliability. So in the end, Florida's tower still stands apart as the most unique and technically complex version of the attraction. One of the most interesting aspects of this attraction is how the story changes depending on where you experience it. So in Florida, California, and Paris, obviously this attraction is firmly rooted in the Twilight Zone. Well, in California back then, I'll get to that. And it was framed as a lost episode of the classic series. There was Rod Serling's narration. There was a supernatural disappearance of the guests. And there's an eerie sense of stepping into another dimension. And it all echoed the show's signature style. But in Disney Sea, like I mentioned, they took a completely different approach. Without the Twilight Zone license, they created an original tale. So instead of science fiction and alternate dimensions, this version leans into different themes of greed, curses, and cultural mythology. So what these variations show is that Disney has a remarkable ability to adapt a single attraction that has the same bones, but adapt it for different audiences around the world. Now, it's an interesting case study in how these attractions are adapted. So in Florida, California, and Paris, it was a natural fit. But in Japan, like I mentioned, even the architecture had to reflect local influences. For example, California's tower drew from Pueblo Deco. Tokyo's version embraced a more ornate style, and it matched the grandeur of Disney Sea as a whole. So not only did they change the culture of the attraction itself, but they changed the architecture of the attraction as well. So what happened in California? We got to talk about this. In 2017, there was a massive change in California. In that year, the Tower of Terror underwent a huge transformation, and one of the biggest transformations in Disney history. So on May 27th of that year, it reopened as a completely different ride, and it was called Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. Now, gone was the eerie Hollywood Tower Hotel. It was replaced by a vibrant, otherworldly fortress of the Collector, who is a character in Marvel, if you don't know. The new storyline casts guests as accomplices to Rocket Raccoon, who enlists their help during the pre-show. And what he wants to do is that he wants to free the Guardians from captivity. Now, the ride system remained the same, but the experience was completely reimagined. There were randomized drop sequences and it synced with a rotating playlist of classic rock songs, turning each ride into a high-energy adventure. So you know how people go on Guardians in Florida, they want to have a particular song, they don't know what song they're getting. It's a similar story here. While the change initially sparked controversy, this version of the attraction really won over people quickly, and it became a cornerstone of California Adventure, of course, of the whole Avengers Campus part of that park. Now, what was reaction like at the time? Well, when they announced the re-theme of the Tower of Terror, fans were divided. Many longtime parkgoers, they lamented the loss of the storyline, and they were nervous that the Marvel overlay might feel out of place in Disney California Adventure. Remember, at the time, Avengers Campus hadn't existed yet. So this was the first kind of truly Marvel experience. Social media was buzzing, of course, with criticism, petitions, and nostalgia for the tower. But once it opened, perceptions began to shift. Guests loved the ride's high-energy humor, the randomized drop sequences, and there was an infectious classic rock soundtrack, of course, that made every ride feel fresh. Over time, what began as controversy transformed into acceptance and eventually enthusiasm. So today, this attraction is celebrated as one of the most successful reimaginings in all of Disney history, really. And it proves that bold creative risks can sometimes pay off. Sometimes they don't, but sometimes they do, like in this case. This attraction is more than just a thrill ride. It's a symbol of how Disney balances nostalgia with innovation. So for many, the original Twilight Zone storyline was kind of a cherished connection to Hollywood's golden age and the eerie brilliance of Rod Serling's creation. But Disney also recognizes the need to evolve. You know, Walt says these parks will never be finished. Of course, I've seen in this version in California when they changed it into Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. Now, these changes often create passionate debates. We love, you know, everybody in chat knows, we love arguing and debating about this stuff. There's a tension between preserving the past and embracing the future. But what this ride does is that it has enduring popularity across its many versions. So it proves that nostalgia and innovations aren't necessarily at odds with each other. Sometimes they're partners. And together they ensure that the attraction remains both timeless and ever relevant. So who knows what will happen next? Maybe there'll be a new theme. The Guardians of the Galaxy version, it didn't just change the tower's look. It completely changed the ride experience. So where the original built tension with horror themes and eerie silence and suspense, Mission Breakout was a completely different vibe. It explodes with energy from the very first moment. Some of you know who've ridden the ride, Rocket plugs in the cassette tape, and then from that point on, it's filled with classic rock songs, excitement, different rhythms and mood and things like that. So instead of ghostly apparitions and supernatural mystery, guests are surrounded by lots of colors, fast-paced action scenes as Rocket leads a chaotic jailbreak. The result is a ride, and it feels less like a haunted hotel and more like a rock concert mixed with a Marvel blockbuster. So this shift in tone, it made the attraction almost more accessible to families, and it really increased its rideability because every combination of music together with the drop profile, it feels like a brand new adventure. What did this ride have to do? How did it impact theme park design in general? Now, it didn't just thrill people. It really changed the way theme parks approach design. Before it opened, thrill rides were often about the mechanics. You know, how fast is it? How high is it? What kind of drop is it? But what the Tower of Terror did is that it proved that a ride could be both a technological marvel, which it was, and a fully immersive story. This richly themed queue in pre-show, it became just as important as the show itself. And it really highlights how important pre-shows are, which is a key theme that we're trying to communicate in this series. And it influenced other projects as well, from Expedition Everest, which we'll cover someday, to Rise of the Resistance, which we'll also cover someday. And these rides show that narrative and environment are inseparable from the ride experience. So even outside Disney, competitors like Universal, they perked up and they said, wow, We could really create attractions where guests don't just ride, they actually live the story itself. So the legacy is clear. It redefined what a theme park attraction could be. And for that aspect, it's a key part in theme park history and attraction history. Now, of course, it's a pop culture icon as well. It's grown beyond its role as a theme park attraction, and it became a true pop culture icon. Of course, its looming silhouette has appeared in all kinds of Disney commercials. There's been park merchandise and even comic book adaptations. Now, this ride has been featured in television specials, documentaries, and it really cemented its reputation as one of Disney's most legendary creations. Fans have been celebrating it through art, cosplay, Halloween events, and it kept its mystique alive long after leaving the park. So whether it's in its original Twilight Zone theme or in its Marvel version, or even the Disney Sea version, it remains a symbol of the ability that Disney has to fuse storytelling, atmosphere, and thrills together into an unforgettable cultural landmark. Now, it didn't just live inside the parks. It became a brand in its own right. Disney, of course, capitalized on its popularity with a wide range of merchandise, t-shirts, pins, all kinds of collectibles. And there is, in 1997, in fact, there was even inspired a Disney Channel original movie, of course, called The Tower of Terror, and it starred Steve Guttenberg and Kirsten Dunst. If you've seen the movie, mention it in chat, because I don't know how many people have seen this. And what this movie did is that it introduced the story to a bigger audience. So the tower has been a centerpiece of Disney's marketing campaigns, and it symbolized the ability to blend thrills with storytelling. Of course, those of you who have been to Disney World know very well, when you enter the park and you're driving to Magic Kingdom, you see the shaky car, and we all miss that billboard, if you want to call it that. So over the years, it's popped up in video games, comics, and cross promotions. So what this does is that it actually not only gives people a recognizable icon, but it encourages people to ride it and to come to the park. There have been lots of awards for this attraction. It earned the admiration of the entire industry. So it received multiple honors, including THEA Awards from the Themed Entertainment Association. The industry publications have consistently praised it as one of the most innovative rides ever built. And of course, fan polls very frequently place it among Disney's all-time greatest attractions. Now, what makes it so celebrated is not just a drop, but it's the way that the ride fuses atmosphere, technology, narration, and storytelling into a single unforgettable experience. It redefined what a thrill ride could really be. Before this attraction opened, Disney, of course, was known for charm and storytelling, and it wasn't that well known for heart-pounding intensity. Of course, we had attractions, Space Mountain and other attractions like that. But what the tower proved is that Disney could deliver genuine thrills without sacrificing the storytelling aspect. So it blended fear, narrative, and rewritability into a new formula. And you got to see this new formula start to manifest itself in all kinds of different attractions, like Expedition Everest, like Cosmic Rewind, like Tron Light Cycle Run. Hey, that's why I have it on. So its role in shaping the idea of what an attraction could be really cannot be overstated. It showed that a ride could terrify, it could delight, and it could immerse people all at once. And it changed forever the expectations of what an attraction could be. Of course, it's earned its place in Disney lore, of course, as more than just a ride. It's kind of a legend. For the studios, it became its defining icon, even outclassing the Chinese theater, much like Cinderella Castle in the Magic Kingdom or Spaceship Earth at Epcot. Fans very often speak of it in the same breath as Haunted Mansion or Pirates of the Caribbean, which is a huge, huge honor. It marked a turning point in the 1990s, and it proved that Disney could create modern thrill rides without abandoning its storytelling roots. So even some versions have been rethemed. We acknowledge that. This tower's mystique certainly endures, and it's celebrated by fans through tributes, merchandise, and lots of memories. It remains a cornerstone of Disney's storytelling legacy, and it's forever etched into the mythology of the parks for sure. Now, hearing directly from the Imagineers give us a window into the heart, the kind of the creative heart of the Tower of Terror. Many of them described it as one of the most technically ambitious projects they've worked on, but also one of the most rewarding. They've emphasized that the story always came first. The drop sequence was designed to serve the narrative, not the other way around. In fact, one Imagineer explained that fear is most powerful when paired with anticipation, which is why so much care went into the cue, the pre-show, and of course the build-up before the plunge. And they recalled the unique challenge of blending cutting-edge ride technology with cinematic storytelling. So it ensured that every technical element felt like it's part of the story. Even today, Imagineers express pride at how the tower has evolved and grown around the world, and it still holds on to the DNA that made it unforgettable. Now, building the tower, of course, was as much an engineering triumph as it was a storytelling triumph. They faced the challenge of creating a ride system that would simulate free fall while remaining completely safe and reliable. So, as I mentioned, instead of letting gravity just do the work, the elevators are actually pulled downward by powerful motors, and it creates a sensation more intense than what a free fall would feel like. So, of course, multiple redundant systems are built in, and it's one of the most rigorously engineered attractions in Disney history. Another great breakthrough was the integration of show elements. As you've seen, lighting, sound, and motion all had to be perfectly synchronized, and it delivered a cinematic experience. And of course, maybe the most innovative feature was the randomized drop sequence, which was, a huge innovative feature at the time. Yes, we had Horizons, which had a changeable ending, and we had a few other attractions that attempted to provide a little variability, but nothing like this. Nothing like when you entered the ride, you had a completely different experience each time. I've talked about the safety systems a bit. We don't need to delve too much into that, but suffice to say, there are all kinds of safety measures built into the attraction as well. Restraints were carefully engineered to balance security with comfort. And the music and sound design, we've got to talk about. The atmosphere is inseparable from its kind of overall feeling. From the moment guests enter the queue, you start getting overwhelmed with different sensory inputs, whether it's there's kind of scratchy jazz and swing recordings, and it feels like it's playing from an old radio. There are subtle sound effects you hear, like creaking wood, distant thunder, and faint whispers. In the Twilight Zone versions, of course, Rod Serling's narration provides an authoritative presence, but Tokyo Disney Sea's Tower, it uses a very original orchestral score to match its grand kind of cursed narrative as well. Now, during the ride itself, silence is just as important as sound. The quiet before the plunge makes the sudden crashes, screams, and all the fun, all the more powerful. As an aside, for those of you who know, I'm a big John Williams fan. And if you've ever watched Jurassic Park, one of the scariest moments of that film is when there's no music whatsoever. So the maestro knew when to pull back and when to actually, dip into the emotional swelling. No difference here. The Tower of Terror has definitely secured its place as a landmark in theme park history. It's very often cited as one of Disney's greatest modern classics. It blends cutting-edge ride technology with a richly immersive story. Its success really elevated the standard for thrill rides. And what it proved is that narrative and atmosphere could be just as important as speed or height. This influence can be seen in later attractions, as I've pointed out, and they carry forward its legacy of story-driven thrills. Even outside Disney, many competitors took note, and they designed attractions that merged this kind of narrative immersion with high-intensity experiences. Go to Universal and check out any of the modern Harry Potter rides, and you could see where this kind of creative DNA comes from. Today, the tower remains a benchmark, and it's an attraction studied by designers, celebrated by fans, and it's definitely a turning point in the evolution of theme park history. We got to look back a little bit about the adaptability aspect too. I know I mentioned this already, but each version succeeded because Imagineers really tailored the story to fit the audience, whether through its Twilight Zone or through Tokyo's version. It proved that story-first design is a winning formula, showing that thrills are most powerful when grounded in narrative. And the balance between nostalgia and innovation, as we've talked about, is very delicate, but it's vital. California's re-theme into Mission Breakout showed that bold risks can lead to renewed success. As we conclude tonight, the Tower of Terror's legacy is definitely undeniable. It redefined what a Disney attraction could really be by seamlessly blending storytelling, atmosphere, and cutting-edge technology into one unforgettable experience. Its many evolutions across Florida, California, Paris, and Tokyo showed Disney's ability to adapt a single concept to resonate with diverse audiences while still preserving its core DNA. The tower has inspired generations of Imagineers, influenced competitors, and set the standard for immersive thrill rides. Now, whether you remember it as an eerie Hollywood Tower Hotel or the explosive Guardians of the Galaxy Fortress, this tower remains a cultural icon for sure, and it's a shining example of Disney's unique brand of innovation. Its story is not just about drops and screams, as we've seen. It's about how imagination, risk-taking, and reinvention can really create legends that endure. So as we do, let's get into it. You'll probably guess that I have a pretty high rating for this thing. From an immersion point of view, there's no other rating I could give but a 10 here. It's Art Deco designed, its age details, and its atmosphere. It's fully realized, and it feels authentic and lived in. The elevator drops are truly innovative. The movement forward is a big surprise. And it's almost all the motion is very purposeful. The transitions are great too. From the lobby to the library and into the service corridors, these are seamless transitions. The sound and temperature and lighting are fantastic. There are all kinds of things that really hit all of your senses, whether it's radios, thunderclaps, flickering lights, and even they shift the air temperature a little bit in different areas. Every single detail is immaculate, from the cobweb furniture to period correct props. And it supports the illusion that this is a real abandoned hotel. The attraction definitely maintained its eerie tone throughout, and no breaks in immersion from queue to exit. There are randomized drop sequences, like I mentioned, so it adds to the surprises. And the visual effects are great. I just showed you some examples of that. The ride system, the story, and the effects are tightly interwoven. And the queue and pre-show are just chef's kiss. They're masterclasses in storytelling. And it builds anticipation from the moment you enter that garden outside. And it all adds up to that moment when you're about to drop at the very top. Storytelling, I give it a very strong score. I give it a 9. This attraction presents a clear, self-contained kind of lost episode of the Twilight Zone. Excuse me. And it has a beginning, middle, and end, and it flows seamlessly from the queue to the ride. From a role assignment point of view, you're cast as hotel visitors who stumble into the supernatural, and it makes them active visitors rather than just people watching something. The visual storytelling is immaculate. There are all kinds of interesting things around the attraction that tells a story instead of not just has interesting things to look at. It actually tells a story of what it's trying to do. And from a message point of view, this is probably why I will ding it a little bit. Now, the attraction borrows a tone of the Twilight Zone for sure, but it actually doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't deliver a moral or a cautionary tale at the end. There's really no lesson learned. There's no wrongdoing punished, and there's no deeper message beyond the thrill of the event itself. Having said that, it's kind of a nitpick. I like having attractions that leave you with a moral. The lack of one here, it's okay. The strengths of the rest of the attraction make up for this lack, in my opinion. Queue and pre-show I've already talked about, and it definitely fits the Twilight Zone's tone to a T. Delight, I mean, come on. Can we give it anything else but a high score, like a 9? From a first impression point of view, as you're approaching this tower, you get a huge adrenaline rush. The emotional connection is great because, as I've mentioned, it drags you all the way to that moment when you're about to drop. Like I mentioned, there are all kinds of elements like the ghostly apparitions, like the narration, and the sudden plunge. That all adds up to a huge dose of delight. As I mentioned, when it opened, it was completely original because not only was it a free fall system, in fact, it was more than a free fall system, but it actually moved the cars forward and backward, and that was brand new at the time. And the randomized drop sequences definitely help because it helps keep the attraction fresh and encourages people to rewrite it over and over again. There are no issues with accessibilities. The only ding is here, it's a very intense attraction. So people who are somewhat afraid of it, which is fine, you may not be able to experience the attraction, which is a shame. The pacing is just right. It's long enough to build suspense and deliver multiple drops. So overall, I give this a 9.32, which is a very high score for this series. I think on average, we've been averaging about a 7 or an 8. We'll leave Superstar Limo out of that average. And I'd be very curious to see what you would rate it as well. So please go to our website, go to grandmiraculous.com. Again, the code tonight is DROP, D-R-O-P. And you can punch in your evaluation and we can compare notes next week. The trivia answer. I mentioned that there's a directory in the Tower of Terror and it has some missing letters here. Well, if you look very closely and you lean over, you can see that these letters have dropped down at the bottom. And there's a very funny phrase there called "Take the Stairs." So that's fun. I love these kind of Easter eggs, and it's great to see this kind of detail added to the tower. Well, where do we go from here? As you know, I like to have some kind of a bridge between episodes. And I think what we'll do is that we'll stay in the studios and we'll tackle an attraction that was also truly innovative and groundbreaking for its time. Of course, it didn't open in the studios. It opened in Disneyland. And it was so popular, it got brought to almost every park. And that attraction is Star Tours. So we've got to talk about the impact that Star Tours had, not only on the parks, but on Disney culture, memorabilia, and just fandom in general. So that'll be a lot of fun to talk about how this attraction really shaped the state of the art. Before I do, I often forget to visit chat and say hi to folks who came in at the end. So I want to really thank people who came in and enjoyed this show. Neil, hey Neil, hope you're doing fantastic. Thanks for being here. Let me scroll. I see Tower of Terror. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I did your attraction well. Feel free to go to the comments after this. And Tony, if you don't have, if you take umbrage with anything I said here, I'm more than happy to hear it. I think it would be great. Okay. As I do, I will end with our quote from Ray Bradbury. Gather round the next great campfire. Let us seek and know and understand and dream a new book, a new instruction book to fly great spaceship Earth through the uncharted seas of the future world. Lock in a dream that is your own. Find what truth is in your blood and beat a path from here to there. Your life is yours to own and be. The world is yours to shape and change. The stars are yours as just reward. Thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you join me next week as we talk about another very, very innovative attraction, which is Star Tours. So until then, be well, and I'll see you next week.